Hello and thanks for joining me on another outing. I finally got out the house and today we're in the lovely little valley of Cwmystradllyn. It's been a terrible day so far, but the weather's broken quite nicely now, so I'm hoping that we'll keep some cloud cover, so I've got some interesting detail to work with. It's quite a short valley, only about 10 minutes drive up from the main road between Carnarvon and Porthmadog, but it's an absolutely fabulous location, a lovely little valley with plenty for the landscape photographer. Now behind me is Cwmystradllyn and it's full of trout, so I'm probably going to treat myself to an hour's fishing before I make a start on the photography. You can get day tickets from Porthmadog anglers and you can also get them from a fabulous little tea room which is only about a couple hundred yards away, just up there, where Kath and Dave will organise tea and cakes and all that sort of thing, and you can buy a ticket for the fishing. What they'll also do is they'll help you out with all sorts of local knowledge, and they're well worth talking to if you come here to do some photography or some fishing. So that's enough to be going on with. I'm going to get my fishing tackle set up and we'll look at some photography a bit later on. Well, that's a couple of nice trout safely returned, a very enjoyable hour's fishing, and I'm going to now grab my camera gear and head on up to the slate quarries. So I'm about halfway up to the old village and something's just caught my eye. This rather fabulous old tree on the lane on the way up, with these foxgloves and this old stone wall leading up to it. It's not going to win any competitions, but it caught my eye and it was worth a handheld. Well, I'm up at the top now, sitting here overlooking the old village where the slate miners used to live. There are actually 3 distinct streets that run along the hillside with a total of 36 derelict houses. The slate quarry over at the far end of the valley, it's probably about a mile away from where I'm sat and where all of these quarrymen lived. It's called Gorseddau. It was at its peak around about 1856-57 when the Ynys y Pandy slate mill was opened, which I'll take you down and show you later on. Beautiful place though, and a really easy walk from where you park the car down by the reservoir dam. It's only probably about 45 minutes to walk up here, very easy track, so I'd really recommend it. This is my first image from up here that I'm looking at. As you can see, the slate workers' cottage down below is in the shot. But what I liked about this composition are these rocks and the foxgloves leading the eye down past the cottage, past the copse of trees, down to the lake. I don't think I'm going to get the sea in the background into this. I'm shooting at 18mm. I could go wider, but it would lose impact, so you'll just have to imagine the sea down there to the right. This is obviously a focus stack. I've got my ISO up at 200 because I need a fast shutter speed to keep these foxgloves still. They're blowing around in the breeze. I've got this shot in the bag with 5 exposures running all the way out to the horizon. It is a pretty vast depth of field because it starts from about 18 inches in front of the camera, so that's why I've taken so many, even though I'm shooting at 18mm. I'm using f8 as my aperture because I really want the sweet spot of the lens to pick up those foxgloves in the foreground. I've got some detail in the sky. It's actually quite interesting, but I think what I'll do is wait it out a little bit here because it is breaking up a bit every now and then. So it would be nice to get some sunlight just on this foreground. Not too worried about the background, but something to bring out these flowers and rocks would be good if I can get it. I did manage to get a very quick shaft of sunlight when I was just up there with those foxgloves, but it was fleeting, so I don't know. So now I'm kind of stood on what I guess must have been Main Street. When you get up to these derelicts, it really makes you think about how tough life must have been as a slate quarryman. Quite apart from spending all day long in all sorts of weathers, sitting on a seat held onto the rock face by chains and hauling yourself up and down on ropes in all weathers, and then coming back and living in an area like this, and you know, you're looking at just over 100 years of these places being abandoned, and there's next to nothing left of them. And it kind of gives you an indication of what the conditions are like up here, how rough it must be for most of the year. I'm just going to wander up and down this old street and look for a composition or two, because I'm not short of subjects. It's just how can I best capture the feel of the place. I've taken a few internal shots as I've walked up Main Street, and I'm right at the top of the street now. In some respect, it's a perfect lead-in line. It leads you all the way down along the row of derelicts, and it's a perfect lead-in line, but it leads to nowhere. The lead-in line is the subject of the frame. And I suppose you could see that as a metaphor for the fact that it's all so sad. You know, I get out and about into the hills a lot. You've probably seen my other vlogs where I'm up in Snowdonia, and you kind of don't think about really the history of the place because it's mountains and grass and bracken and lakes and all that sort of thing. And you kind of think, well, there's wild goats, there's sheep farmers using the uplands. But Snowdonia, for a very long period of time, was a hive of industry. There was hardly any valley or any escarpment that wasn't quarried in some way. When you look at the stonework, it's absolutely fabulous. You know, all the angles are squared off. They didn't throw these houses up. They expected to live here for a long time. I mean, who knows? It could have ended up as another Llanberis or Blaenau. But anyway, this is my shot, just shooting all the way down this street, trying to get everything in, and then the backdrop of the view down the valley to the sea. I'm shooting at f13, but I'm focus stacking because I really want it to be as sharp as I can get it. So I'm going to head all the way down this street, back to the car, and then we'll go down to the mill. And if I take any more shots as I wander down, I'll show you them as I go along. So I've come down to the slate mill at Pont y Pandy, and there it is, as you can see. Incredibly impressive building, and if you decide to come and photograph it, don't panic, you really can't miss it. It's right alongside the road. So this is quite an amazing piece of architecture for its time. Opened in 1857. There's nothing like it either at De Norwig or Ynys y Pandy, which were much bigger quarries. But of course the huge slabs that they were creating here demanded a bigger workshop. In the trench here there was a 26-foot diameter overshot water wheel which was run from the stream. I can't trace where the leat was, but 8 meters diameter. I mean, that's pretty big. But of course the power needed to saw and machine the slate that was coming down from the quarry obviously warranted a building of this scale. And a real tragedy that it was only in use for 14 years because the whole business went bust in 1871, apparently because the quality of the slate that was being quarried from where we were earlier on wasn't up to standard, and so the bottom dropped out of their market basically. For this first shot I'm set up with this wing of the slate mill, and I've also got the mountains of Llyn Peninsula in the background and some quite interesting detail in the sky as well, so it's adding some quite nice depth to it. And I've got my ISO back down to 100 because when I was up the top of the hills earlier everything was blowing around so much that I was shooting between sort of 400 and 500 ISO. Not the end of the world, but not ideal. So I've obviously got a much slower shutter speed based on that, shooting at f11, and again I'm focus stacking because with this leading line, I don't know if you can see it, but with this wall I've actually got some detail quite close to the camera, so I really want to keep that sharp as well. Surely you didn't think I was going to miss the opportunity to take a shot using one of these arches as a frame. Well, I'm now getting some lovely detail in the sky over there. I thought about the kind of standard portrait shot that you'd expect of a big gable end of a building like this, but I really wanted to put it into context of the landscape because there's nothing like it for miles around. I think this is worth a wide landscape shot. So I'm down at 18mm and I'm just playing around with that sky. I'm exposure blending, but what I've done is I've got my exposure for the building, so now what I'm doing is I've got my exposure compensation 2 stops down, so I'm just exposing for the sky. Where the sun is peeping through the clouds, it's clipping ever so slightly, but if I didn't have it down by 2 stops, because I don't use filters in the fields, it's going to be blown out and I wouldn't be able to do anything with it in post. So I'm just going to take a few more shots here because those light rays coming through are looking lovely, and I'm hopeful I'll be able to really bring those out in post. Oh, that's looking good now. As you know, this is my favourite sort of landscape photography. That lazy stuff where you're all set up and you're just waiting for the light, you're enjoying the views, you're under no pressure or stress whatsoever. It doesn't get much better than this. So I've moved again, and it's all about the sky now. This creates some foreground interest, but those high clouds are looking absolutely fabulous, and I don't know, It just depends. If the sun is masked when it's low down, they won't light up. But it's landscape photography, so you have to hang around just in case. There are worse places to hang around, of course. I think there's so much low cloud on the horizon that it's going to snuff it out. And I drank the last of my water about 3 hours ago. I'm gasping for something to drink. I suppose I could go and stick my face in that stream. Knowing my luck, there'll be a dead sheep in it a couple of 100 yards further up. Well, I think that's about it for tonight. The light's gone now. I think we've pretty much had it now. It's pretty solid grey, and there's supposed to be a weather front coming in anyway, so if I hang around I'll probably only end up getting rained on. What a fabulous day. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I really hope you can maybe get along here yourself one day and check it out, because it's a fabulous location. So with that, I'll say thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate your support and encouragement, and if you haven't subscribed yet, why not do it now and join me next time. Cheers.